Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Patreon Roundtable. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen, and with me I have Amanda Conkin and Tim Gerasi. Say hi, guys.
Hey, what's up,
Hi
everybody?
guys.
Awesome. So tonight we are going to be getting into a spoilerific spoiler cast for Batman v Superman. We're going to talk about everything. Nothing's off the table, including the deleted scene that was posted this morning.
I need
That
to
clearly
watch that.
Amanda hasn't seen. It's okay. You didn't miss too much. It was cool, but it's
I'm gonna
we'll
watch
talk
it
about it
while we're
briefly.
recording. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna
I like I said, this is like everything. There's nothing off the table. So if you haven't seen Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice: the first movie in the DC cinematic universe: except for Man of Steel: Justice League prologue: could the title be longer?
but,
I and
but also
I
like Man of Steel, right? We get
yeah,
to talk about Man of Steel as well.
yeah,
All of the
yeah.
things.
So let's wow, I don't even know where to begin with this movie. Let's start by talking about how we each feel about it. Tim, how did you feel about Batman v Superman?
So, first off, going into it, I was super excited. I mean, this is probably my most anticipated movie of the year. And I know before it came out a few days, you heard the negative reviews, but at the same time, I've heard positive fan reaction from early screening. So, by the time I was sitting in my theater on Thursday night, I was super excited and pumped up. But when it was over, I hate to say it, but I had mixed feelings on it. I didn't hate it, but at the same time, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to and I expected to. So I'll say I like it, but there's a few more issues that I had with it than I expected to have going into it. So
Okay,
I'm mixed.
okay. Amanda, how did you feel about it?
I'm really biased with like all things Superman, and I enjoyed Man of Steel. I've seen it a lot of times because whenever it's on, I just play it. So it's not as if I think it's a good movie, but I really enjoyed it. Like
Mhm.
I understand objectively like what the issues are with the movie, but in terms of like knowing what the franchise had been set up to be with Man of Steel,
Yeah.
I could not have asked for anything different. Like that was exactly what I expected. It dealt directly with the consequences of Man of Steel in a believable way. One of my favorite things about Superman is Lex Luthor and Lois Lane. Like those are two of my it's not necessarily Superman stories for me are not necessarily about Superman himself. It's about his relationships with other people. And those two relationships with Lex Luthor and with Lois Lane and how they affect Superman are like my favorite thing. And that movie, I think, dealt with those two elements perfectly. So I was really excited in that regard, and I think that it did a good job for what I wanted the movie to be. I just kept expecting it to be atrocious because of the reviews, but what I think is that people were reviewing it not for what it was, but for what they like wanted it to be. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, but that is with the caveat that I also really enjoyed Man of Steel. So that's
Totally. I'll just say, but before I talk about how I felt about it, I'll just let everybody watching know that they can tweet at us. They can tweet at ThunderQuackNet, or you can tweet at any of us individually as well. We're all kind of watching Twitter. So if
yeah,
you want
we
to let us know what you thought of Batman v Superman, then just tweet at us at ThunderQuackNet. I'm at ArcWolf. Tim's at TimG311, and Amanda is at A Conkin.
KON.
KONKIN. So I'll say the movie has problems for sure. It is a Zack Snyder movie, so it does have issues, just like every Zack Snyder film does. There's a lot of style over substance in a lot of places. The key to it is that there's about 45 minutes in the movie that doesn't need to be there. It could be cut right out. There's a lot of there are the three dream sequences. The first two dream sequences are really only there to establish the third dream sequence as not actually a dream sequence, and so there, like, that to me is a bit of a problem because as comic book moviegoers, I think, and I'm not saying comic book movies as a genre because it's not really a genre, but if you're gonna play within those tropes, especially when you're telling us that you're going to bring the Flash into it, I think that we can follow along. I think we're good. We didn't need two other completely meaningless, pointless dream sequences that, if you want to justify it, say set up Batman's character. That, I mean, I'm sorry, who are you that you don't know that Batman is an orphan? His parents were killed by a random shooter in Crime Alley, and so he became Batman, right? Like, it's all kind of superfluous to me, as well as a couple of the action sequences are just a little longer than they need to be. The Batmobile chase is just a little bit too long. The pacing's just slightly off. But I think that what a lot of people are responding to is either end of the spectrum. Either you're someone who has no idea what is going on in a comic book movie because you've never read a comic book, and you saw the Batman Begins, like the Nolan trilogy, and you've seen like a Christopher Reeve Superman, and like that's as much as you've seen of DC Comics, and so you're sitting through that movie going like, who's this guy? Who is Alfred? I don't know what's happening. What is this? What's going on with Bat? Why is there no Robin? Why did they show us a Robin suit that has spray paint on it? What did the spray paint say? I didn't see. Did somebody see what the spray paint said? Can somebody tell me? Who's this guy in blue? What's his name? Like I people not understanding, like Perry White's actually a black guy in this movie, right? Like stuff that if you're not up to speed, so to speak, that you would be like, I didn't follow any of that because, and this is where I say we're getting into full spoiler territory, when Batman has a dream that sends him into an alternate future timeline where Lois Lane was killed and Superman goes evil, and becomes a dictator and allies himself with Darkseid to take over the Earth and uses parademons as his foot soldiers. So Batman has to lead a resistance, and then you get through all of that only to have Batman wake up and go like, whoa, that was the weirdest dream yet. And you're going like, wait a second, how can Batman be having a dream about parademons and Apocalypse and Darkseid? He doesn't know what any of those things are. And then as soon as you're thinking that, the Flash bursts through in lightning and is like, Bruce, you gotta go back. You have to go back in time and stop him. Like, I mean, if you are not a DC Comics fan, you are watching that going, who was that guy?
Yeah.
What was happening? But DC Comics fans are watching that going like, I'm sorry, this is the second movie in this franchise, right? And they just had the Flash burst through into, I think, a dream in the past to warn Bruce Wayne that if Lois Lane dies, that Superman will become evil. Like, as a huge fan, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that in the moment, and then you wrap it around and you're like, that was the coolest thing that anybody's done in any of the movies yet, whether it's Marvel or DC or whoever. I don't care. That's guts. That's like sheer guts to be able to do that and pull it off, I think. Yeah. But I think so. You've got the fans or the non-fans, I should say, on one side who just saw Batman and thought that they were going to see another Dark Knight movie that was going to be totally grounded in reality, where nothing fun happens at all. I'm not a big fan of those movies. Yeah. And then you have the other side of it, where you've got people like us that know exactly what's going on, but that unlike us have a strict adherence to the canon, and they want it to be Batman doesn't kill, Batman doesn't do this, Superman doesn't do this. There are rules. I want my heroes to be an ideal to strive towards, and not blah blah blah. Sure, I get it. Like, that's fine. I understand what you're saying, and I do think that overall that's what we should be working towards. But I also think that just as it's always been with these characters, they've been around for 70 plus years, depending on the character that you're talking about, and in that time, they have been reinterpreted and switched around and played different ways in order to make a point about who the character is at its core. So, for a movie that borrows from The Dark Knight Returns, obviously. It borrows from Red Sun, because that whole dream sequence, like the apocalypse stuff is a little bit outside of that, but like Batman leading a resistance against the totalitarian dictator Superman is Red Sun, and Batman's outfit's even totally right out of Red Sun. You've got a little bit of I would say like Superman for All Seasons in the way that Lex Luthor interacts with Superman, which I really like, and you got just like bits and pieces of other comic book storylines all throughout it. I mean, people want to act like one is superior to the other when they're talking about the Marvel way of interpreting it and the DC way of interpreting it. I'm more inclined to go with the Marvel way. I think it's a little bit truer to form. It's a little bit truer to the spirit of those characters. They're more faithful adaptations to the screen. But with Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, I do think that really deep down the core of those characters is intact. I do think that Superman is in there. I think that the world that Superman inhabits and the world that Batman inhabits, I think that that's where you've gone darker and grittier, and I wouldn't even say more realistic, because it's not even realistic as so much as it is hyper real. Like everything is heightened. So like I think if you put all those things together, people want like when you look at the Marvel movies, stylistically those movies look like they could be happening outside your window, right? Like even the Winter Soldier and Civil War movies being a little bit on the grittier side of things, it still looks like our world. It's still very relatable. Whereas, like, not that we really spend that much time in Gotham specifically in the movie. We spend a lot more time in Metropolis. Gotham doesn't look like anywhere that I've ever been. It looks like a movie, right? Like it looks like a cinematic universe. So I think that people are disconnecting with that, and I think that that's part of it. I think the other thing is just like what I'm sort of alluding at, which is an us and them mentality, where people feel like they have to pick sides. As a lifelong video gamer, I know this struggle all too well. Tim's laugh tells me that he knows exactly what I'm talking about, and that is like the console wars, right? I mean, anybody who was alive I shouldn't say alive, but like at the right age during the late 80s and the early 90s knows exactly what I'm talking about, and that's everybody's need to pick a side, Sega or Nintendo. And at the end of the day, isn't it just better to have both? Like can't you just, like, I know, you can only afford to get one, so you get your Nintendo, and that's the choice that you've made, or you get your Sega Genesis, and that's the choice that you've made. But really, like, it would be the best if you had both of them. If you could just have a Sega and a Nintendo and enjoy both. And thankfully, these are movies, not multi-$100 video game consoles. It turns out that you can actually go see Batman v Superman, enjoy it this month, and then in another month you can go to Captain America: Civil War, and you can enjoy that too. Like, nobody's going to show up at your door and, like, take away your Superman statue because you think that Iron Man's really cool. And it's not going to happen vice versa either. Like, you are totally allowed to live in both worlds. It's perfectly fine. I mean, I have Star Wars guys up here, and then I have a Superman poster right there, and then I have all the Nintendo and Sega characters you could ever want behind me, and for some reason Slimer. So, like, if you're a fan of geeky things, just be a fan of geeky things. You don't have to pick sides, and I think that that's one of the things that's happening with a lot of people.
I don't know. I think one of the other issues I think with this is that it's not necessarily just about fans. Like, some people that have the loudest voices are the people that don't actually know what they're talking about. So, I mean, my parents were down this weekend, and I had gone to see Batman v Superman before the weekend, and then was talking about it, and then my mom at the end was like, well, maybe I should just watch Man of Steel, and I was like, I would love to watch Man of Steel with you. So I basically watched Man of Steel with my parents, who, like, they go see a lot of movies. They were confused. Like, it's a confusing, if you don't understand sort of Superman, like, my parents are people, so they understand Superman, but they had no context for, like, who anybody was. Like, they didn't know. They were like, what was the name of the planet that blew up? And, like, all the things that they just, like, don't know things. And so the storytelling narrative of that story is hard to follow. I didn't realize how much it jumps around, and my dad's like, I thought he landed as a little boy. How come he's grown up now? How come he's a little boy again? Like, he didn't understand the, like, way that the narrative was being told, and I can understand how that would happen with Batman v Superman as well. Like, in terms of just the storytelling style, going back and doing flashbacks, I understand what you had said this earlier, that they had to shove a Batman movie into a Superman versus Batman movie with these flashbacks because people don't know, right? Like, my mom, she, again, was watching Man of Steel going, I don't understand what this has to do with Batman. I'm like, Mom, it doesn't have anything to do with Batman. It's a Superman movie. But anyways, so then for people that are just going to see movies, like my mother will probably go see this movie and then just, like, not understand it. So there's something to say about, like, consistency of story, and, like, when you get down to the core of a story, are you able to tell a story that people can follow and track? Even if you have convoluted characters, there's something to be said about the Marvel Universe in the fact that it adds people that are fans of the universe, but it doesn't detract for people that are not. Because that's something that I enjoyed about Marvel, because I'm not really a Marvel fan. I don't know a lot of the lore, but I was able to appreciate them as its own thing and as movies, and the more I learned that people would tell me stuff about Marvel, I'm like, oh, what a great additional piece of knowledge to have. I think that there are some issues in that if you are not a fan of these characters, or even if you, like, are missing a few things, it detracts from the film, right? And that's my one thing, is that I would love people everywhere to be like, oh, Superman is so great, and I love what they're doing with DC, and I want to consume all the rest of the media, just like people have been doing with Marvel, right? Because they get really into these characters, and then they want to go back, and they want to experience them in different ways. I do not feel that this film would ever do that, because unless you understand a lot of things, which again is one of the reasons why I loved it, because I got all those little things, I actually think it takes away from the film and from enjoying it as an audience member. So that's, like, really disheartening, and what when we're talking about the difference between Marvel and DC, I think that's the biggest downfall. Yeah,
it's interesting because I say that there's about 45 minutes that you could chop out of the movie, but in fact there's about 30 minutes that they're going to put back in the movie for the Blu-ray release, and they're going to release it as an unrated or an R-rated whatever version. And one of the pieces that they're adding in there is a deleted scene that they released today, and that deleted scene is of a character from the Fourth World, which is sort of like Apocalypse and let's forget the name. Is it Genesis? Yeah, it was right there. You beat me, Tim. They Apocalypse and sort of all of his adversaries. Sorry, Darkseid and all of his adversaries come from. And it's this scene of Lex Luthor he's somewhere in the ship. He's somewhere in the Kryptonian ship, and he's communing with one of the characters from Fourth World. And that scene not being in the movie makes the final scene with Lex Luthor make no sense. Right, like he has his whole like he's coming, and like he flips out, right? Like and then they switch over to his office or his father's room or whatever, and it's got the painting flipped upside down, and like it's very ominous, and it's obviously alluding to something coming, and those of us who know what's going on know that that's alluding to Darkseid, into Fourth World, into Apocalypse coming to Earth, and that's what Justice League is going to be about. But I think for like the non-fans to see like that he's basically talking to a demon, and then talking later in the movie about like he's coming, it would make a little bit more sense. But at the same time, like you don't necessarily need it. But seeing that clip, I was then like, oh, like that should be in there. That was supposed to be in the movie. And I think one of the keys here is that Zack Snyder makes movies in a 5 act structure a lot of the time, and not a 3 act structure. And we're so used to the 3 act structure that when we go to a movie to sit down for 2 hours to 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think is probably the end of what people consider an okay sized movie. Um, if it's not in the 3 act structure, if it starts to break out of that into a 5 act structure or a 7 act structure or something crazy, people get really uncomfortable because the second that you break out of 3 acts, you start adding layers of complexity onto the storytelling. And it's one of the things that I always noticed in high school when you're talking about Shakespeare, because a lot of Shakespeare is in 5 acts, and people sort of look at that and it's those layers of complexity. It's not set up your story, bunch of action in the middle, climax, denouement, right? Like that's what we're used to. Like that's sort of your basic story. That's about as simple as it gets. If you have less acts than that, you're not telling a real story. But when you get into a 5 act structure, you have room in there to you introduce everything, and then you have like an interlude, and then you can have rising action, and at the end of that rising action, you have a big climax with a big fight. And then after that fight, you have another interlude with like more weird exposition and stuff that ends in another huge climax fighting Doomsday, and then that has like a 20-minute falling action that you're like, okay, we get it. Superman died. Like, let's carry on with this. Is the movie over yet? Because it almost felt like we were watching Return of the King at a certain point when it's like, yes, it's sad. Superman died. It's still sad. Batman's still standing off. Like, and it even like one of the things that really bothers me about the end of the movie is that it time jumps within the falling action. So Superman dies, and then like sort of the funerals are all happening, and then we jump back to Batman going and seeing Lex Luthor, and then we jump back to before the funeral, or not before the funeral, but like just as the funeral is ending or something. Batman, like Bruce Wayne's walking up the cornfield, and Lois Lane is dropping the dirt on the grave, and it's like it's. I mean, it's sort of one of those things that you kind of have to be paying attention to even notice that it jumped around in time, and a lot of people would be forgiven for not even noticing that it did that. But it's one of those things that subconsciously I think people are going to pick up on and think to themselves, that made no sense. What just happened? Was he at the gravesite, and then Batman went to the prison and confronted Luthor, and then he went back and Lois was still there and they hadn't put the dirt on Superman's casket? Like what happened, right? So there's a few moments like that in the movie that discombobulate it a little bit. And it's not helped by dream sequences that are actually alternate futures that turn out to be the Flash traveling backwards with some sort of a mech suit in order to warn Bruce about something that's not going to happen, because the second that he comes back, it stops that future from happening. So like I left the movie going, it's going to be really cool to see them build up to the point where that happens, and then Flash goes back. And then, like, an hour after I left you guys, Amanda and I went and saw it with my wife and our friend Scott. And an hour after that, I was sitting with Crystal, and I went, no, we're not going to get to see that in a movie, because the Flash going back stopped that future from happening. So we won't get to that point in Justice League. That's not what's going to happen in Justice League. It's going to be totally different. But I had to do some Flash time travel mathematics in order to get to that point, so I forgive myself. Tim,
Yeah.
you've been pretty quiet.
I know, just like you said, there's so much to get into this movie. But going back to what you guys were saying with, the pacing and the editing of all that, that goes into pretty much one of my bigger complaints about it. Pretty much actually for the first half, or like the first like hour and a half or so of the movie, it just takes you from you're following one character with, like, let's say for Bruce Wayne, then you're off with
Yeah.
Clark and Lois, then you're with Lex, and okay, back to Bruce, back to Clark and Lois, back to Lex. And those scenes just don't last that long. Where it's just jumping way too fast. Where I think if you can stretch them out longer and just get more invested in what those characters are going through. And that's why I'm kind of curious if the new Ultimate Edition cut is either going to add to that pacing problem or help it,
Yeah.
where maybe it'll extend some of those sequences that I felt were jumping all over the place and where you get more invested with that. But
Here's what I would love to do. I would love to take Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and Paul has just commented in the chat here. He would like to see the Bruce Wayne destruction footage from the movie added into a special edition of Man of Steel. What I would like to do is to take everything and show it in chronological order.
Yeah.
So you take both movies together and you cut them, and you know what I think you could do? If you put the two of them together, I think you'd actually end up with like maybe 4-hour-long stories, right? You kind of cut it into that, and you'd have to sort of lay it out with the time codes and figure out what the pacing is and where you can have act breaks and stuff. But I think that you could tell the story from Krypton up until the death of Superman and have it all play out chronologically with like Kal-El lands on Earth, he's taken in by the Kents, he grows up, and while you're doing that, you're also intercutting with Bruce Wayne, and his parents being killed, and all of that stuff, getting up to the point where you get to Man of Steel, and then, you know what, like, maybe let's wait until Suicide Squad comes out, because Suicide Squad might have some Batman flashbacks as well. So, but yeah, I think it would be really cool to sort of see the Batman-Superman story play out in chronological order and get rid of the dream sequences. And most importantly, I think the biggest thing you can do to fix this movie for me, the thing that bothers me the most, is having Bruce Wayne wake up from a dream sequence in a dream sequence.
Yeah, that's weird.
It was totally unnecessary, and it reeks of a studio executive note saying, like, but did the Flash actually come back? Because, like, it seems like that's still part of a dream. I think that we should make that part of a dream, because otherwise people are going to be like, why doesn't the Flash just fix everything? And it was because that's not the way that it works, but... You know, we know that, but
really when it's in a dream sequence, because you're questioning it more. It would just be so much better.
Exactly.
Cool, like, okay, the Flash really did come, and that's what is going to set Bruce off. So
exactly. Or is it somehow somebody from Apocalypse affecting Bruce Wayne in some way, right? Because that message is ultimately what ends up sending Batman like really down the path. Like, he's paranoid and crazy about Superman already, and then this happens and he goes, oh, I'm right. And so now he won't listen to anybody. Like, now he's hell-bent to stop Superman because he's seen what the future is. So I don't know. So we've kind of picked apart the things that people might have problems with. Let's now talk about the things that we loved about
bathtub scene.
Okay. Amanda, you go first.
No, sorry, that was just like super adorable. I loved it. Sorry, I just like Lois and Clark.
But what else? What did you like about the movie?
I really I jumped my cue. I liked the opening of it. Or that, like, Lois's journey. Again, I like Lois. But, like, the idea that, like, she's smart, and that's what I really like about her, is that, like, she gets stuff, and in a way that I always fear that when you have a character that becomes such a focal point of something, like, right, the idea that, like, people were like, Lois is the key, and if she dies, Superman will go evil, and all, and, like, that being, like, a thing, that if the thing I hate the most is when somebody's like, ooh, I'm compromising this hero, I need to, like, step back, and that didn't really happen. Like, she was aware of what her role was, and I'm just really hoping that she continues to be, like, who she is as she goes forward, and we don't get into one of those situations where she's like, oh, I just can't be with you, like, I need to, like, let you be you, without, like, recognizing that she's actually important to who Superman is. But one of the things was just that realization where she's, like, understanding how she fits into that picture, and the fact that they were able to track her and therefore know that Superman was coming, and getting those first glimpses into like the power that she had in that situation and her understanding maybe how to deal with that. And it actually, in this movie, at least not having consequences for their relationship. I know that they're now like, he's dead. But like it more or less, like they like she sort of talked to him and they had a few good conversations where like they both understood the consequences of their actions but were both okay with it. Like, so that was something I was like, and I loved Lex. I know that people are really torn about Lex, and about the casting of Jesse Eisenberg. Is that his last name?
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. But for who he was in the movie, I think it worked really well, like in terms of understanding the different layers of Lex and having like a connotation of who Lex is in a larger scheme of things. The biggest thing that people said going into it or was this idea that like Batman is the bad guy. And like he's not. Like that's the thing, is that like Lex is the bad guy, and Lex always is the bad guy. Lex is the best bad guy, because Lex doesn't get his hands dirty in the same way that other people do. Like he knows how to manipulate people, and I think that that's even worse, especially when you have somebody, if you understand the context of Batman and the fact that Batman is like supposed to be so analytical and like understanding sort of a situation, to be able to manipulate Batman. Obviously, he's utilizing stuff that we have yet to be revealed to us and will probably be revealed to us in Suicide Squad. And if you understand the history of that Robin suit, you get a little bit more insight into. But the thing I like is that like Lex is smart, and in this movie, Lex was exactly what I wanted him to be. He knows what he's doing. Yeah. He knows how to manipulate people, and just seeing stuff as it goes through, you sort of know that wheelchair is going to be somewhat important, like the way that it's used, but like that, I felt like there was real consequences, and Superman felt those consequences, and that's the biggest thing for me when people say that Superman is invincible, and he's not. Like the absolute, I just welled up a little bit thinking about it. The best moment for me in that movie is when Superman's in the explosion and the explosions happen and his eyes are closed and he's just like taking in the weight of the consequences of like what just happened. And that to me is like, that's why Lex is such a good bad guy. He doesn't have the powers to fight Superman, but you don't have to have strength to fight Superman. You have to have like an understanding and smarts and be able to manipulate people. And I don't think they failed us in this movie for that.
Yeah, I think the key to this version of Lex Luthor is that like kind of what you're saying, it's not about having the physical strength to combat Superman. It's about being able to go so dark and so evil that Superman can't even fathom it, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's kind of the key, and Lois kind of says that to him in that moment where he, right after that happens, he says, I'm afraid that I didn't see it because I didn't want to see it. Right? And that to me, like, that's Superman. Like, Superman showed up that day in order to confront the situation and not hide from it, because that's who he has to be, right? Like, he has to be that ideal. He has to stand accountable. He has to be responsible for his actions. Otherwise, he's not Superman. He's some other superhero, right? But because he's better than the rest of us, that's the ideal, that he shows up there in order to kind of like answer for what's happened, and I'm sure to defend himself as well, but also just kind of to acknowledge how people feel, to give them the opportunity to express themselves, so that like they can have a dialogue rather than just turn him into like a straw man, right? But what ends up happening is he goes there and Lex has concocted a plan to turn even more people against Superman, and to not only that, but to undermine Superman's actions, not to everybody else, but to Superman himself, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where Lex is the perfect villain, and that's where I draw the line to Superman for All Seasons, because Lex Luthor in that story, in that comic book, he creates a superhero out of a woman who is obsessed with Superman and wants his attention, and uses that as a way to manipulate Superman. And like she ends up getting hurt, and I think she ends up dying. And it's basically it's Lex's fault ultimately, right? Like he's the one who's responsible for it, but he crafts it in a way that Superman feels responsible as well. And so like it gets underneath Superman's impervious skin, right? Like that's the thing. That's where Lex Luthor is his greatest enemy, because like yeah, Doomsday is able to stick a spike through his chest, right?
Yeah.
But Lex Luthor is really the one who forced all of this to happen. The way that he manipulates Batman into doing what he wants, and then he manipulates Superman into meeting Batman on the battlefield. Like the way that plays out is exactly how it has to happen in order for us to watch that movie and still consider them both heroes at the end. Right? So Batman's not the bad guy. He's certainly an antagonist. He's an antagonist for Superman, but he's not a bad guy. He's never a villain.
And sorry, this is just adding on to that. The idea that he's a little psychotic is also really nice, because Lex isn't always painted that way, right? Lex is like he's like a businessman, and he's very like he knows what he wants and he gets it. This Lex, I think that you need that little bit of psychosis to be just as evil as they needed him to be for this, which I really like as well. And I mean, I don't know if people will get this, but I'm going to throw in a Buffy metaphor in here for a moment. But the idea between Spike being a bad guy and Angel being a bad guy is that like Spike just like causes chaos and likes violence and will like is like I'm a bad guy, and there's a lot of bad guys that are like I'm a bad guy, whereas like Angel just likes to see the world burn and just likes to like even if he's not evil, he'll still find a way to ruin your life, like even if it's not through violence, he just wants to see you burn. And that's the thing that I love, that I think is about this Lex, is I get a little bit of that residue, like regardless of anything else. And I don't know why they didn't really need to cover that, but like this Lex just wants to see Superman burn, and not even like physically, like death is sure an added bonus, but I think he wants to like destroy him, and that's what I really like.
He was and I think I said this when we came out of the movie, he's Lex Luthor via Willy Wonka.
Yeah.
Like there's a really weird connection there that I think is intentional. And there's even a moment where I feel like some of the music even kind of plays into that. But he's kind of like he's an eccentric, detached billionaire that has no thought of the consequence of real human life. He just like what he wants is what he wants. He's almost like a spoiled child in that way. That that he's just like he lacks that compassion and empathy because he was never taught compassion and empathy. So he's unlike Superman, who is taught all of that stuff and is the ideal of that. Lex here is a human being devoid of all of those things. And so you see how human an alien can be and just how alien a human being can be. This is the reason why I think like this. It's a good movie because we can talk about it on these levels. If it was a bad movie, we wouldn't be able to talk about it like this. If it were Superman 3, we wouldn't be able to talk about it like this. Superman 3 is fine, but it's not a good movie, and it's certainly not a great Superman story. It's kind of just a bad issue of Superman, right? But this, I think, is like it really boils down a lot of really cool concepts of these characters and puts them on screen together for the first time as well, which is a huge triumph for DC to finally have Batman and Superman on screen together, because it's only ever happened in cartoon form. So, Tim, how about you? What did you love about Batman v Superman?
So one of my favorite moments of the whole movie is actually, I've been seeing a lot of mixed responses to it, and this is not the fight itself, but versus Batman and Superman, but it's what actually ends the fight. And I've seen a lot of mixed reactions about it. But when I saw that moment, and I was always curious going into it, what is it going to be that makes them stop fighting? Is Doomsday going to show up and have to work together, or does Wonder Woman show up and get them to stop fighting? But I was always curious what it was going to be, and when how it played out, I was like, okay, that's awesome. I love that, because as weird as it was, as one of my problems was seeing Batman going full on executioner, having that spear ready to kill Superman. That felt a little weird enough to me, but that's what the story was playing at. But when when Superman said they're going to kill Martha, and that just resonates with Bruce right away. I bought into that because as a big Batman fan, one of my favorite things is whenever they dive into the murder of Bruce's parents and the motivation for why he is Batman. Every time they dive into that, I'm going to be like fully invested into it. So when they mentioned Martha. And that just got Batman's attention right away. And that's like, how do you know that name? I was like, yes, that is going to be the one thing that gets Bruce to stop in his action. He was dead set on killing Superman. What could be the one thing that will stop him? It'd be something that's tying with his parents. And I thought it was also cool that, at least the stories I've read and watched, I've never seen too many like characters like play on the fact that Superman and Batman, their mother has the same name. So I thought the fact that they brought that into it was pretty cool. And so I totally bought into that, to why that was the reason Batman stopped to kill Superman. But then it led into probably my favorite sequence of the movie was Batman taking down Lex's men in that warehouse, and just probably the best Batman action sequence we've ever seen put on screen. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. And even that fourth trailer that came out where they showed a lot of that sequence, it was like, oh, this is like the Batman I've been waiting to see on screen for so long. But the reason why he's there to save Martha Kent, that just added another level to it for me, just how awesome it was. And then the ending part too, a little geek out moment where they just took that classic scene from The Dark Knight Returns where that mutant saying, "I'll waste your man, believe me, I'll do it." And when I heard that Lex's guy said that, I was like, come on, Batman, you gotta say the line, "I believe you." And then when he did, I was like, yes. So just that whole sequence, how it all played out, how the reason why Batman was there, and how the Superman and Batman fight ended because of Martha Kent and tying in with Martha Wayne, I thought that was great. So that was probably my favorite part of the movie, and one of the big moments I was like super invested in. It's like, okay, now we're going here. So I love that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. That whole element of it, that it's Clark's mom that ends up being the thing that ends up saving Superman, like that. It's the cool thing about it is it's the moment when Batman realizes that Superman's actually human. That even though he's a Kryptonian, he's an alien, he's actually human. Like he's not doing this out of some sense of pride or I don't know, like a bloodthirst or anything like that, or just like being crazy with power. The only reason he's even there is to save his mother, which like the fact that Lex goes that far is one of my favorite things in the movie. Is like that when you finally realize that this is where it's going, like that Batman's been set up and that he's been put on this path, and you go, okay, well, Superman's just not gonna bite, right? Like he's Superman, he's just gonna turn the other cheek, he's gonna take the high road, right? And then here's Lex like pushes his girlfriend off of a building. Not like because that's something to do, but only just like to get his attention so that he can go, oh, by the way, I kidnapped your mom, and I'm going to kill her unless you kill the Batman, or he kills you. I mean, like, I'm happy either way. And so, like, that sets up a battle between these two characters that I can sit and I can enjoy, knowing that neither one of them is going to pull punches. I mean, I do think that Superman is fighting with a bit of a handicap because he's not going to kill Batman. He's just trying to put Batman down, just for long enough that he can explain what's going on and they can take out Lex together. So Superman's kind of fighting with one hand behind his back because he's constantly like he's throwing him through walls and stuff, but he's going like, I gotta throw you just hard enough that I'm not gonna kill you or send you off into space, but like hard enough that to stop screwing with me, like. And one of my favorite lines in the whole movie, and it's in one of the first trailers, is Superman saying, "If I wanted it, you'd be dead already." And like that to me, like as the Superman fan who's been arguing this fight for basically most of his life, that's my thing. Is that like if Superman wanted it, everyone would be dead. Like, there's no one that can actually stop him. The only character in the DC continuity that can really really go toe-to-toe and maybe beat Superman is Darkseid, right? Because even Doomsday, he can kill Doomsday. We've seen it. I mean, it happens, right? But there's a cost to it. But Superman comes back, and Doomsday doesn't for a very long time. But he does eventually. But that's a terrible story, so it doesn't matter. And I don't even think it's the actual Doomsday. I think it's a clone of a Doomsday, which doesn't really mean anything because Doomsday is already a clone. But I go too deep down that rabbit hole. But like that aspect of Superman and Batman fighting, and the two characters sort of like being maneuvered on the chessboard together to fight, and that it actually ends up being Lex. That's the reason why it happens. Far superior to. Loki shows up, wants to get captured, so he lets Captain America and Iron Man capture him, and then Thor shows up, and then they fight because they haven't talked about anything yet, right? Because they don't realize that they're on the same side. That's been done a million times. It's not that Superman and Batman don't realize they're on the same side. It's that they actually believe going into these battles that they are on opposing sides, whether it's Superman showing up at the beginning to say like the bat's dead, bury it, right? Or Batman forging that kryptonite spear and going like, I have to put this alien down or he's going to take over the world. Both of them feel like they need to do it. Like they're both still heroes, and they both still think that they're being heroes by fighting one another. And then thankfully they figure it out and everything's great. And in my opinion, the best part of the movie happens, and that is Wonder Woman shows up to save both of them.
With the lasso. Wonder Woman's lasso, I take it back.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part, is just like that moment. And something that's bothered me is that people have been like, why didn't he just give the spear to Wonder Woman? She could easily take him down. I'm like, because she has to hold him. She's holding him with the lasso.
She's holding him with the lasso.
That's why he can get at him. So
and it's the one thing. It's the one thing that works because the lasso's not a weapon, right? So it's not hurting Doomsday, but the power of that lasso is able to hold him in place so that Superman can do what he needs to do. And
that moment was such like a great payoff shot that hardcore DC fans have been waiting for, to see Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman take on a bad guy and defeat him. They all play their parts. Wonder Woman pulling with the lasso, Batman shoots him with the kryptonite, and Superman delivers the final blow. Yeah,
my absolute favorite part of the Doomsday fight sequence, other than Wonder Woman showing up, but like the part that brings a smile to my face and just warm joy to my heart, I just fill up with warmth whenever I think about it, is how out of his element Batman was, and how scared he looked the whole time. Like there were some really cool moments where this is like before the kryptonite comes back into play, where Superman and Wonder Woman are fighting Doomsday, and they're just like they're hammering him with these hits and like leaping over Batman, and Batman's just like, what is happening? What have I gotten myself into? How am I gonna survive this situation? And like how do we stop this? Because like he's just you can see it from the time that he goes oh bleep to until Doomsday is down. Batman's like, every second this goes on is a second closer I become to death, because like he's not in a situation that he can handle, right? Like this is one of those parts where Batman runs away and he gets in one of his gadget things in order to use that, but his jet's already been taken out, so he's he's totally screwed. And I just love that aspect of it, that like Batman at the end of the day is just a man. He's not even Iron Man, because Iron Man has armor, and his armor has armor now, right? Like the Hulkbuster is literally a suit of armor that goes over his existing suit of armor. So like Iron Man can deal with a lot of stuff. Batman in this movie, even in his battle outfit, his battle gear, is still very vulnerable. And I think that that's really cool, because it just shows the different levels of the heroes. And even Wonder Woman comes in, and she they definitely wouldn't have won without her. Like, they needed
Mm-hmm.
Wonder Woman, and she was the key to winning that battle,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the best parts of it. But Superman is also on a level above her. Like, you can kind of see that, like, as strong as she is, if it really came down to it, Superman could handle Wonder Woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
that, like, but it and like you just sort of seeing like how these three interact with one another, and so much of this movie, so much of it was setting up the future and what's to
Yeah.
come. And for me, that is really like the biggest takeaway, and it leads into like one of my other favorite parts of the movie, which is when Bruce decodes Lex's hard drive when he decrypts it, and you go through and it's like, okay, yeah, we see Wonder Woman's been around for hundreds of years. Whatever, who cares? We already know that. Doesn't matter. She's in this movie, so we'll see more exciting stuff with her later. And then you see the Flash, and you're like, yeah, we see that every Tuesday night. Who cares? And then you see Aquaman, and you're like, so he can swim fast. How exciting is that? Like, show me Aquaman riding a shark or something like that. Like, come on, we know he can do cooler stuff than what we saw him do. And that scene is also about 30 seconds too long. But
Yeah, right? Sure.
but then you get to Cyborg's introduction, and that's the one that like it plays, right? Like it does. It's not just like 30 seconds, and you're like, oh, that was a cool introduction to that character. It's like that's a full-on introduction to a character, where it's like there's a scientist dude, and some guy who is only part of a human being, strapped to some science board of some sort. Yeah, like I don't know what that is, and you're going like, what's happening? Like, what's going on? And then it flashes to the clip where he's got the box, which we now know is a mother box from Fourth World, and which all has to do with Darkseid and stuff, and New Genesis. And he takes the mother box and he takes it over to who we know is Victor Stone, who becomes Cyborg, and all of a sudden this thing just like starts merging with him and like turning into body parts. And I was like that was the moment in the movie where I was like, anybody who thinks this movie is stupid is stupid.
Yeah.
They are the one that is dumb, because this movie is awesome. And even if that was the only cool thing in it, that still would have made the movie pretty awesome. And I really feel like that gets it to a level where it's like everything that's coming is going to be even better than what we've gotten so far. And if you go back 6 months ago, I was against this movie. So I was totally flipped on this. And going into, Suicide Squad still looks like garbage in my opinion, but it's at least going to be important for the rest of these movies, so I have to see it now. But going into Wonder Woman next year, I mean, Wonder Woman's going to be awesome. I think
my God.
We can all agree
awesome.
If it's Captain America, but with Wonder Woman and in World War One instead of World War II, sign me up. Like, I'll buy my ticket right now, because that's going to be a cool movie, right? And if what we got of Wonder Woman in Batman v Superman is any indication, she's going to be like off the hook in this one. Like, whatever she does is going to be even further like higher up, because she's going to be on her own, so it's going to have to be that much cooler, right? Because it's one thing to see Wonder Woman sort of do her thing while Batman's swooshing around and Superman's like zooming in and out of the fight. But if it's Wonder Woman by herself and she's got to hold her own and sort of hold the audience by herself, she's gonna have to get fancy, and that to me is like that's where it's gonna be really cool with her, when her like hardcore martial prowess comes out and we see her use like 3 different weapons in one fight. Like that'll be really cool. And that little picture that they've released from the filming of like her and the other 3 Amazonians, like, I'm sorry, but like cool. It's basically you're taking Captain America and Thor and you're smushing them together into one movie, and I think it's going to be really cool. And then everything else coming after it looks really great too. So I don't know. I'm just really excited for the future of DC movies in the DC cinematic universe, and I did not think that I was going to be there.
Yeah, and I
Which
thought they did a
it's
great job
refreshing.
too, as far as you heard the concerns too about, oh, is the Justice League and the cameos
Yeah,
going to feel shoehorned in and all that. And for me anyway, it did its job in getting, like you might, getting excited for
yeah,
their own movies and the Justice League coming up. If I could just be a little greedy fanboy right now, when they had all those, when they were looking at the files and you have like the Flash logo, the Cyborg logo, I was like, there's one missing there. That's the Green Lantern logo. He's
yeah,
such an
yeah.
important member of the Justice League. We have to wait a little while, but
Yeah.
other than that, it got me pumped up. But kind of what I'm curious what you guys think as far as going into Justice League and with the death of Superman at the end of this movie. Because that's one thing I'm a little, 50-50 on going into Justice League. Like, how much are we going to have to focus on, Superman being dead and then establishing him coming back? Because we know he's going to be in Justice League. It's just how long are we going to have to wait for Superman to show up? Is it going to be, the main course of the movie? Is it going to be them trying to get Superman back and he's only in it at the end, or is it going to be established like the first 20 minutes and they get Superman back and he's with the team? So
I think it's fair for them to keep Superman out of the first two acts of Justice League Part One. I think that establishing because with Wonder Woman we're going back in time, so we're going to go back and we're going to tell her backstory, and then with Justice League Part One, I think the focus that first act will be bringing the team together. It'll be what Bruce and Diana are talking about at the end of the movie, and like we need to bring them together to fight, and like if they don't want to, like that's what Superman was there for. Like his example is what we'll use to rally them, and so I think his sacrifice ends up being a really important part of the genesis of that team. That it's almost like without Superman, you need, like, now that the world has a Superman or had a Superman, without him, you need the Justice League to pick up that slack. So because no one of them could do what Superman did on his own, they're going to need all six of them in order to do that. And I think I think that that'll be really like the driving force in the beginning of the movie, and I would love it. I would love it if you're dealing with whatever threat that's building throughout the movie that's related to Darkseid and Apocalypse and all that. And as we're getting the team together, we're sort of encountering these threats, and just sort of at the end of Act Two, when all hope seems lost, like we're in the middle of the big battle, and Darkseid's minions are like coming through a boom tube, and it seems like there's nothing that the Justice League can do to stop it. Superman shows up in the black outfit with the silver S and the long hair, and even the beard. For me, if he has the beard, because he looks so good with the beard in Man of Steel, right? Like if he's got the longer hair and the beard and that black suit with the silver, and he shows up and just like annihilates stuff, and then everybody's looking like, wasn't Superman dead? And then he's just like, yeah, I got better. And then the team is really together, and then you think like, yeah, they saved the day, and then that's when Darkseid shows up, and that's when you're like, oh crap, because even the seven of them are gonna have a hard time with Darkseid, right? I just feel like that's so perfect. It's so perfectly set up to build that the stakes, right? Because if you have Superman as part of the team already, everybody joins automatically because they're just like, Superman's asking me to join the team. Of course I'll join the team. But without him, like there's a reason for there to be a Justice League. So even though, again, like, it's the things that I think a lot of the fanboys and fangirls are crying out about, is like how far this has departed from the continuity, from the canon. But for me, it's those places where the story is actually different that make this the most interesting. Because as much as I think I know where they're going to go with everything, I didn't think they were going to kill Superman in this movie.
Yeah.
I really didn't. Like, I thought that this was going to be like like Doomsday was just going to be a bad guy, like a monster for them to fight. He may as well have been a giant robot. It makes no difference. The three of them are going to come together and they're going to defeat Doomsday, and that's what happens. But as is supposed to happen, Doomsday kills Superman, right? Like that's the way that it plays out. So, but it was a surprise because so much of the continuity has changed that anything is possible. And even something that seems as rote as Doomsday killing Superman ends up being a surprise ending that none of us saw coming, which is, I don't know how they did that. I don't know how they did that. It was almost like a magic trick where they were like, over here, look, it's Batman and Superman fighting, and then Doomsday kills Superman. And you're like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. He's Doomsday. Yeah. That's kind of his whole thing. Doomsday isn't really a character if he's not around to kill Superman. So, but Amanda, what do you think? What is set up for Justice League?
Yes. I have two things in my brain that I needed to get out that were like from so long ago, and they've been brought up. I just have to they're just in my head. So, two things. The first one about Justice League is they were so strategic with the Aquaman promotion because the whole time Lois was underwater, I just kept expecting Aquaman to show up, and that way that they had like set up your expectations only to be like, nope. And so they did a really good job of disappointing me there and making me excited to see like how the Justice League actually comes together because. I don't know. I just think that was really good misdirection in terms of like setting stuff up for like what you like anticipating what you want. And then another thing that's really unrelated, but it might have to do with like Batman shifting and how he's seeing stuff for the Justice League is one moment I really, really liked was the moment where Batman is in his jet thing and flying back to Gotham, like bringing Doomsday, and just seeing how much havoc Doomsday is wreaking and having a realization moment about like this is what Superman just like had to deal with that I was so mad about, like when he was fighting, if you're fighting a really terrible bad guy, like you're gonna destroy stuff. And so there's this realization of like what it meant to be a superhero to the standard that Superman was, I thought was really, really interesting and really exciting. And part of that, what you were talking about, Batman realizing how out of his element he is. And that was something I wasn't expecting with the Justice League, that it is going to be Batman's imperative. Because of the three of them, and I mean, me and my buddy made a bet, when we're thinking about who's going to say, like, let's do recruiting, it wasn't Batman that we were thinking of. We're like, surely it's either Wonder Woman or Superman. Yeah. But in this instance, to have it Batman being the one that wants to bring people together and understands the stakes that they're at, I thought that was a really interesting thing and something that made it exciting to go forward. Because my big thing always with the Justice League, and I guess with the parallels between like the Justice League and the Captain and Marvel, is the idea that like the leaders are really like Superman and Captain America. But the ones that we let be in charge are Batman and Iron Man, right? Because they're the ones that want to be in charge. And in this instance, I'm actually like, no, I think that Batman's going to take on a real imperative to like get the Justice League together, and that's something that, as you're saying, is like unexpected, right? Like you would just assume that people would flock to Superman's side, but they're going to have to do something different.
It's also really cool because Batman is older. Obviously not older than Wonder Woman, but he's old. Like he's an older Batman, so he takes on a bit of like sort of the elder statesman position in the Justice League, especially because you look and the Flash is so much younger, and Cyborg will be a lot younger, and we really don't know about Green Lantern yet. But I feel like you're gonna have there will be a cool breakdown of the team of sort of like that variety where Batman can sort of be the older leader sort of figure, and then you'll have sort of the next tier, which is like Superman and Wonder Woman and Aquaman, who everybody kind of looks up to, and then you'll have I think you'll end up with the younger ones. I don't know. I think we might not end up with Hal Jordan. I think we might end up with Kyle Rayner as the Green Lantern, because Kyle Rayner would also skew younger, because he would be like his early 20s. So you would have sort of Batman at the top, and then Wonder Woman, Superman, Aquaman, and then Flash, Cyborg, and Green Lantern. And it would be like a really cool dynamic to the team to have Batman sort of be the guy at the top, calling the shots. And I do think that he'll end up being sort of the one that's hanging back and strategizing in these bigger battles, right? It's sort of in the same way that we see Captain America work in the Avengers movies, where they go into a situation and Cap's the one who says, "Okay, I want you up there. I want you guys over here doing this. I want you guys doing this," and sort of breaking down the dynamic of the team and setting up the duos and stuff like that in their tasks. I think we'll see the same thing with Batman.
One thing that I think that we're skipping over a little bit, and that I know that it's sort of on purpose, is the significance of the Suicide Squad movie. Because in terms of something that's coming next, is that next in chronological order in terms of Batman's current timeline, or is it previous? And I think that that'll be something interesting. Do we know the answer to that yet? And the other thing for me is just, sorry, you can answer that first. Do we know if that's the case?
I'm pretty sure they said this Suicide Squad takes place after Batman v Superman.
Yeah, okay. So Suicide Squad does, but we don't know if the sequence that has Batman in it takes what. Yeah, I should say we're pretty sure that the sequence that has Batman in it is a flashback.
Okay.
That is part of Harley Quinn's origin story.
Okay.
Because it has Harley with the Joker, which would theoretically, logically place it in time before Harley ends up in is it Blackgate that they're in? It's probably Blackgate or something like that. It's not Arkham because it's a prison. It's not an asylum. But yeah, so I think that's sort of the way that they've set that up. I think, again, just like Man of Steel and just like Batman v Superman, it's going to be a non-linear story. I think there are going to be elements of it that jump back and forth to tell some of these characters' backstories. And because of Suicide Squad, some of these villains are actually going to be played out as heroes. So.
What? The thing for me that I'm really hoping is that there's an interesting hidden thing in it. Like the idea that one of the big things for Batman v Superman for me was that I didn't really know what the core of the story was from the trailers, and my buddy's big complaint is that he's like, why would I go? I've seen the whole movie. And my thing, going into that movie, I'm like, no, you genuinely don't know why things are happening and the reason for it until you watch the movie and you understand this narrative. And I really hope that there's a little bit that's given to us in Suicide Squad that might actually hint towards Batman in a way that maybe we weren't expecting, or understanding the world in a way that we weren't expecting. And that's something that I'm kind of hoping, because the more that you look in it, they've showed a lot of fights and you get the essence of the Suicide Squad, but I still don't know what that movie's about, right? So that could just be me missing some stuff, but also I'm kind of excited to see if it leads us any closer to what the Justice League is going to be, or what that world could be. So that's, I don't know, something.
Paul in the chat is asking, do any of us think that the Joker in Suicide Squad might be Jason Todd? And I had sort of alluded to that when I was talking about, you see the Robin costume and it's got spray paint on it, says the joke's on you, and I absolutely think the only way that Joker works is if it is in fact Jason Todd. So it
can't be Joker.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I think in order to place this Batman in time, and sort of who he is and what he's willing to do, I think that we need to find out that the Joker is dead by Batman's hand. I think that that's important, and I think that it's like Man of Steel is kind of influenced and bolstered by Batman v Superman, in my opinion. And I think that Suicide Squad is going to do the same thing for Batman and Batman v Superman. It's going to sort of continue to build on that character and the world, and really start to establish what the larger world is, because Batman v Superman focuses on two cities that actually happen to be right across the bay from each other, apparently. Which bothered me, but whatever.
Yeah, I know, so much.
I mean, I should say, before Smallville, the TV series, I always considered Gotham and Metropolis to be the DC versions of New York City and Boston.
Oh, I thought it was Chicago for Gotham. Like
Yeah,
that.
so sometimes people think of it more that way, um, but I always kind of thought of it as those two cities that are almost kind of like, even though they're right next to each other, they're very different, right? And it sort of plays into it because New York is a very modern sort of, even though there's older buildings and stuff like that, it's sort of older stuff like that 1930s, 40s mixed with cutting edge futuristic, modern technology. And then you look at Boston, and Boston is much more of like the older Gothic architecture and that sort of thing. Um, and that fits into those two cities and the personas that they have. So I always thought that like that was kind of how I played them out. Although they are not right across the bay from each other, they're a few hours away from each other.
Yeah.
But the idea that they could be close to one another makes sense to me. Just perhaps not quite that close. That Batman can see Superman from his balcony or whatever. It was a little bit weird.
Super
But
weird.
but I do think like going back to Batman and sort of having to flesh out his backstory to explain where he's at in Batman v Superman. I think it's really important to establish that his world has been destroyed. That Dick Grayson was around, but left. He stopped being Robin for one reason or another. Whether or not he's Nightwing, I think is open for debate. But I think that more than likely in this continuity, Dick Grayson just stops. He just walks away from it. And maybe they'll go back to that and they'll bring him back in future movies. But I doubt it because it just doesn't feel like there's room for that right now. That Jason Todd shows up to replace him, and that the Joker does what the Joker does, which is kill Jason Todd, only for it to be revealed that Jason Todd is now the new Joker after Batman defeats that Joker for good, sort of. Whether he kills him or in a battle the Joker ends up dead by accident, but Batman still feels responsible because when you get to it in Batman v Superman, Bruce is living kind of off the grid. He's not the party going Bruce Wayne persona and then the Batman at night sort of thing that we're used to. It seems like he's just Batman, right? Like he's not
Yeah.
going to Wayne Enterprises meetings every day. He's not living in Gotham City or just outside Gotham City. Seems like he's living like almost completely off the grid. And then you get that moment of Wayne Manor, and it's all burnt out, and it's like a husk. And to me, that says that like he's left his life behind, like that this Batman, something's happened that that he can't live there anymore. There's too many memories, and it's not just his parents
Yeah.
because that's not enough, right? Like it's got to be that like he tried to rebuild his life and the Joker destroyed it. And so if we learn that the Joker burnt down Wayne Manor and captured Jason Todd and then ends up brainwashing him and all that stuff, sort of melding together a Death in the Family with the Batman Beyond Return of the Joker storyline, bring those two things together into like one sort of perfect Jason Todd Robin storyline. I think that would be awesome because then you leave yourself open for Tim Drake, the best Robin of them all, to show up in future movies. For that Batman solo film to have Tim Drake in it as the new Robin, and for us to move forward with that, and that would be the best thing in my eyes. But I'm biased. Tim Drake's my favorite, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if they're gonna go that far with the Joker if they, really have the guts to do that. Because for me personally, I'm not buying into that theory right now that he is Jason Todd. But at first, I kind of don't want it to be. I kind of want to be, classic Batman versus Joker. But the thing that gets me back to where it could be cool is what you mentioned, Mike. If it takes from Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, because I absolutely love that movie and that story of how they got the Joker back in there. So if they play a little bit of that angle, I think it could work. But I don't know. I just don't know if Warner Brothers and DC are going to go that route. Do something. I mean, they could. We've seen 2 movie versions of the Joker already, so they could do something drastically different. So I don't know. Plus, I know been some early on rumors about the solo Batman movie that it might play into Jason Todd and Red Hood and all that. I think Jason Todd probably will be a factor somehow, just if they're going to go, Red Hood route, or if they're going to play it up where he is the Joker. So right now, I'm not fully getting into Jason Todd being the Joker, but I'm not going to totally close it out. I'm leaving my interpretation mind open that it's a possibility.
Yeah. Paul is saying, I think Dick Grayson might replace Batman at some point. I think that might be why Bruce was portrayed at the age he is in this movie. I think that's a good point. I think that's possible. What I would rather see, and I know I just said Tim Drake, but what I would really rather see is Batman Beyond, right?
Yeah, me too.
That's what I would love to see, is for them to go that way. And to if they're at the point that they want to phase out Ben Affleck as Batman and bring in somebody new to take up that mantle, to me, the awesome thing to do would be to go Terry McGinnis and to go Batman Beyond with that, because that everybody that was the age to appreciate Batman Beyond is now at the age to appreciate a Batman Beyond movie. So I think that could be really, really cool.
Yeah, it could be cool too. If all these first phases of movies are done, we don't know how long they're going to go into it. Yeah. But instead of rebooting the whole DC cinematic universe again, they can continue it, but have it be something new and different set in the future with Batman Beyond, because they haven't established Justice League in that universe too. So it's totally a next logical step for them to go that far once they're done with all this stuff. So I'd be totally down with that.
Yeah. Wow. I think I've talked about everything that I wanted to talk about. We can open it up if there are any questions in the chat. We can go to that, or if people want to tweet at us. But I don't know. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to say before we wrap things up?
I guess for me too, as a Batman fan, my two biggest complaints, which I said before, are the pacing, and then with Batman, I was expecting him to, there were to be some death tolls on him, but in the movie, I expected it to happen. I was kind of picturing it to be something similar to what we saw in Batman '89, and how people died in that instance with the Batmobile and all that. But I just couldn't help but feeling that it maybe went a little bit too far for my liking, especially in that Batmobile sequence, because that was a cool action sequence, but as it was playing out, I was kind of took out of it because I kept thinking, ooh, that was a little extreme for Batman to take that person out like that. Oh, there's another moment where the Batmobile crashes on that gun. It's ooh. So things like that. And then, but as I see it continue on, the movie and getting to see Ben Affleck's performance, the bottom line is for Batman, I thought Ben Affleck did a great job.
Yeah.
Going into this, I thought he had the potential to be the greatest live-action interpretation of Batman. I won't say that just yet, but if we get to see more stories and movies with him, I think he probably can take that top spot. So I'm looking forward to not only in Justice League but a solo Batman film, just to see Ben Affleck in his role as Batman. And the fact that it looks like he did kind of turn over a new leaf, sort of say, at the end of Batman v Superman for what happened, and being kind of inspired by Superman 2, that he will not be killing as much, or hopefully not at all in future ones. So I'm definitely hopeful.
Yeah, I do. I think you're right. I think that much in the way that Superman has to go through the trial by fire that he does in Man of Steel to learn the lesson of limiting collateral damage, and obviously the only way for him to really understand what a life is worth is to have to take one, right? And so especially it being Zod and having to kill the only other Kryptonian that he knows is out there. So that, I think, ends up informing the Superman that's in this movie, and I think that similarly, the actions of Superman in Batman v Superman, it's going to inform Batman's character moving forward, and hopefully bring him back to probably where he was when he started as Batman, and a little bit more compassionate, let's say. But Matt Campbell says he just wants to point out, don't rule out Damian Wayne as Robin, because DC loves that character, and I'll agree with that. I do that's possible. They could end up bringing Damian Wayne into it, but they'd also have to establish Talia and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff in order to bring. And so if you establish Talia, you got to bring in Ra's al Ghul and
I'd
all
be all
that.
for a Dick as Batman and Damian as
Yeah.
Robin storyline. That would be
Yeah.
awesome.
That could be cool. Paul wants to know, is Doomsday really dead? And I will say, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but they're movies, so yes, Doomsday is dead. We're never going to deal with Doomsday again in the movies. If it were the comic books, I would say, of course not. No one's ever really dead. Characters can always come back. But since it is a movie universe, yes, Doomsday's not coming back. That's the end of that character.
Yeah.
We won't see any more from him.
I agree. He served his purpose for what he needed to do. Get Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman to fight. And you don't want to waste a big gun like Darkseid for something like that. Just use Doomsday.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a brute. So no, he's not coming back. I agree.
One thing we didn't talk about is Jimmy Olsen. So, like, I don't know if that's a thing at all, but the thing that kind of made me sad was reading like an article in which he was just like, well, we have too many people in this movie, and for the universe to continue, like, we don't need a Jimmy Olsen, so let's just use him dramatically in the beginning. And then they copped out, and they were like, let's not name him in the movie so that we don't, like, give it away. And that, I think, is like a cop-out. I'm like, if you're going to do something, then do it. Like, make us, like, I mean, those watching, you sort of, like, knew it was Jimmy Olsen to start, and you're like, oh, cool, Jimmy's in this movie. But because they didn't say him, as soon as they kill him, you're like, oh, maybe that wasn't Jimmy, because they didn't mention that it was Jimmy, and then they just killed him right away. So it was like a little bit of a bother to me.
Or something.
Yeah, right? Where you're like, I don't understand the purpose of this. And like that actor that they cast, I understand, because I think it was an article I was reading about how he actually interviewed Jesse Eisenberg for the role of Jimmy Olsen originally, because he wanted a person of name. And I actually know that character, like the guy that played Jimmy Olsen in the beginning of the movie as a photographer, was from Smallville and like in a couple other things where he played I think he was Perry White's son or somebody in Smallville.
Yes. Yeah, he was.
And,
you're right.
And so so it was kind of he was on the OC as well. Yeah.
A couple other things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, to me, it is incongruous with the character that I know is Jimmy Olsen, but this whole continuity is completely different from everything. So, I guess I can allow them that, but for me, like, I'm going to choose to just believe that wasn't Jimmy Olsen. That's in my head canon. That's not Jimmy, because Jimmy wouldn't do that. But not because Jimmy wouldn't do something of that sort. Or get tricked into doing, or coerced into doing something like that. But Jimmy would never put Lois in danger like that. It wouldn't happen. And if Jimmy Olsen exists, then he has to be Superman's pal. And that guy wasn't Superman's pal, because Superman didn't show up to save him. There was no signal watch. So,
they said too that one of the scenes they're going to put in the Ultimate Cut is Jimmy and Lois meeting together before they go to that scene. So it's like they're meeting for the first time in that moment. So it's totally different from the whole Jimmy Olsen Daily Planet dynamic that we're used to. That's for sure.
I don't know. I think it's fine if they want to believe that that's Jimmy, but I don't have to. It doesn't change the story for me to just go, that was some random guy that was assigned to Lois Lane. I don't know.
Okay.
I just rather that wasn't. I just rather that Jimmy Olsen wasn't dead. I prefer to believe that Jenny is Jimmy Olsen's replacement. In the story.
Definitely.
Right?
I like that.
I prefer that. And you know what? It really doesn't matter, because James Olsen on Supergirl is an awesome version of that character that I love. So, I've got that to fall
You've
back
got your
on.
Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah, exactly. So, cool. Let me see. Is there anything else? I
don't know. I can't see a chat. My thing is broken. So, what else was I gonna say? There's just cool things in Superman, in Batman vs Superman, Superman 2. If you will.
I think at the end of the day, it is a decent movie with some really cool parts to it that bring it up to a good movie.
Mhm,
Plot line wise and pacing and editing and all that stuff,
mhm,
it has a lot of issues, but really it ends up coming down to being a pretty good movie because of all of the cool stuff
mhm.
that's contained within it. I mean, like, man, any movie that has that intro for Wonder Woman, like that
Mhm.
first
Yeah.
appearance, like, I don't think that another superhero has a first appearance in a movie as good as Wonder Woman, because I think everybody else is kind of like it's built up to it.
Mhm.
Um, but for Wonder Woman, like her first time in a movie, I mean, if you don't count the Lego movie, but the first time for a live action Wonder Woman, let's say, um, just to sort of be waiting and waiting and waiting, and then when she shows up and that music just punches in, it's
Yeah.
so good. It's so good because it's just like the tone of the movie changes, and you're like, oh, this is Wonder Woman's movie now. Like that's what just happened. Is like she showed up to save them from
Mhm.
Doomsday, and then we switch back pretty quickly to it being Batman v Superman. But for a brief moment there, it's like, oh, this is like
It's
Wonder
Wonder
Woman
Woman's movie.
just took over.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
she just took the reins of this movie, and everybody is okay with that.
Yeah.
And
And
Gal Gadot was
yeah.
awesome. She was like in both aspects of the character.
Yep.
In
Yeah.
the Diana Prince part of the character, I
Mhm.
think she plays it spot on, like
Mhm.
pitch perfect. And then Wonder Woman on screen is exactly what you want Wonder Woman to be. So
Yeah, it made me really excited for the Wonder Woman movie. Like even more
yeah,
so, like the fact like I hadn't been looking into a lot of what was going on with Wonder Woman because I wanted to sort of experience this first, and the fact that it's like stuff that's past and that it got to her to a certain place, I really like that,
yeah,
and I like that she's just such a cool character when like the way that she's fighting and her style and the way that she looks on screen is just really really exciting. So I'm really excited about that. If something came of this movie, I'm stoked. Regardless of the stuff that happens with Justice League, I'm stoked on the Wonder Woman movie. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Well, I think that's it. I think we've talked this one as much as we can.
yeah.
Um, I did not prepare to draw a name from the
Really?
hat. Yeah, I didn't do it. Um, shoot. Okay. I can't do this on the fly. It takes a little bit too much preparation. You guys talk about something for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Let me see if I can do this. We do technically have half an hour, so
Okay.
go ahead. Talk about anything. It doesn't even have to be Batman v Superman. Talk about Arrow.
But it can be Batman v Superman.
It
Oh,
can be.
I don't want to talk about Arrow this week. I'm so just like disheartened by Arrow. That is, you know what? In the one thing that maybe is like after a week of like maybe having a disappointing talk about Arrow, I did like that I had Batman v Superman to sort of redeem the DC universe for me in a little
Yeah.
in a little in a little way.
Yeah, I
I
think
don't
I'm
know.
in agreement with you guys where this last episode was probably one of the
Yeah.
worst of the season for sure.
Yeah.
But
Something that's also interesting is I was thinking about Ezra Miller and the idea of the Flash and how people are really upset that this movie like completely then just makes it that it's not part of the same continuity as the television series, and how that's kind of it was upsetting. And I remember a lot of people being upset because wasn't it as soon as the Flash premiered on TV that they announced Ezra
yeah,
Miller as the Flash,
yep,
and so people like having a hard time with that. And if you're going to come into this, maybe one thing we could talk about is actually the representation of the Flash in this movie, because he had the most screen time, which was weird considering that they promoted Aquaman so much, which I thought was interesting. I did not expect the Flash time travel thing to happen, and that was something that was really interesting to me. And as somebody that's new to that character and has only really been introduced to the Flash through the television series, I'm now like a little bit more like a little bit more disheartened that I'm like, what a way to like a disservice to sort of your other properties, while also being like maybe a good way to bank on your other properties, because I now know who that character is because of the television series. So I don't know. I'm a little bit torn. I think Ezra Miller looks like he's gonna do an okay job from the 30 seconds of screen time that I saw of him. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on sort of like the Flash representation across the medias? with
Yeah,
this.
I was always one of those people who would wish DC would embrace, a shared universe with the TV shows and the movies. That was always my dream, but I kind of accepted it now that that's not going to happen in this case. And they're already kind of like at least recognizing there's a multiverse out there, so
Mm.
it would be kind of cool later on, like whether in a TV show or a movie they reference like there's other universes out there. Maybe if you get a shot from a TV show or a shot from the movie in one of the scenes,
Right.
something like that. But I think just from a marketing standpoint, they're probably with Flash and Ezra Miller. There are, I think, going to get some confusion for people who are fans of the TV show and are not hardcore comic book fans, and they know there's a Flash movie coming. They just might assume, oh, it's going to be the same as the TV show with the same actors and everything. And then when it's not, and you see it's a totally different actor and different actors playing the same characters, it's probably going to take some people off guard. So I'm curious, like how much are they going to how they're going to market that, or if they're ever going to do it at all, or just kind of go with it. So it is going to be interesting to see how they all play that out. And one thing that does have me a little concerned is that their track record, what they've been doing for characters that are in the movies and their TV show, seems like they kill them off. With Amanda Waller,
Yeah,
we
the
have killed off,
yeah, and
Deadshot. So it's like by the time the Flash movie comes out, are
yeah,
they going to cancel Flash, or are they going to get Barry Allen out of that series and maybe have Wally West take over as the main
yeah.
Flash, and so Barry Allen can just be in the movie? So I'm just curious to see how they're going to play up the whole Flash dynamic by the time that movie comes out.
That is how many years is it away? Do we know? I forget in
I
the
believe it's
stuff here.
2018.
Okay, because that is like the biggest sort of incongruity to me is the idea that you can have two separate flashes, but you're like, ooh, we want to save the Suicide Squad for the Suicide Squad movie
Yeah.
and take them out of the TV series. So that was the biggest thing for me. That was kind of like a sore spot where I was like, but you're ruining these, you're like watering down these awesome TV show characters and TV shows because of some weird brand confusion thing when you've done a very good job of sort of trying to establish that that it's a different thing and a different part of the
Yeah.
brand. So that is always something that's a little bit weird to me. I really want to see. I want to see how they use them in Suicide Squad to see if it's worth it. So I don't know.
Yeah, plus too, like they kind of say they don't want to do a shared like universe between the movies and the TV because you might handcuff, the creative teams behind the movies and the TV shows.
Mm,
Even by doing that, you're kind of sort of doing the same thing because they can't use these characters anymore. So
yeah,
I think it'd be easier to have the writers and producers and showrunners work out a creative way story-wise to explain why if they're in the same universe while Superman and Batman
hmm
aren't in or with Flash and Arrow on the TV shows. They can work ways around that.
yeah,
So yeah, one day hopefully we'll get a seamless universe on the TV and
yeah.
movie front like Marvel's kind of doing with their stuff. So
Oh my God! Isn't tonight the Flash Supergirl crossover?
yeah,
Is that tonight or was that last week? That's today.
it's tonight. Yeah.
Ooh, it's recording right now. Okay, but because that's something that is kind of cool because I don't think the Supergirl universe could necessarily be a part of the universe that's happening right now, like the Superman universe that's created in Batman v Superman. So that is something that's maybe like the redeeming thing for me is that I'm excited that I maybe get more different kinds of
Yeah.
DC than I do have to just like throw all my eggs in one basket, which is the thing with Marvel a little bit that I feel a need to sort of like I feel like I'm missing out on some parts of stuff instead of being able to like just appreciate these TV shows or just appreciate the movies. So you never know. There's pluses and minuses to both, I guess. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully this model will work for DC for a little while, and that will, or not for a little while, but like in the near future, and that we won't take away from the TV shows by having these movies around, and hopefully they'll start to build on one another a little bit more. And like be able to feed off of another and like bring DC back as a brand in the public consciousness. Not that I ever like really went away, but
Yeah. I'm kind of hopeful.
Oh, sorry. Go. You can finish your thought. Finish your
No, I'm
thought.
just gonna say I'm kind of hopeful that one day we can get more recognition throughout the different shows and movies, basically because what we're seeing with the Flash and Supergirl team up, because they're gonna establish it's a different universe. He's not going to National City just like a few hours away from Central City. He's traveling to another universe. So, and plus in the episode where they travel to Earth 2, you saw those awesome glimpses of like the different universes
yeah,
of
so
Supergirl in the
cool.
90s Flash TV show. So if we get something like that where he's traveling through that and you see Superman and Batman from the movie universe, just little things like that would be cool
Yeah,
to have them connect.
yeah, yeah. So we'll see. That'd be cool.
Okay, so we have a winner. I did it.
Oh, yay!
So our winner of the Batman v Superman prize pack
And all the
is
people were included that were in part of the chat, right? That were on yesterday.
yes, I believe so. Is anybody still in the chat that isn't on that?
Sorry, I just wanted to double check.
No, yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Listen to the chat, and if you're there.
This might not work super well because I don't think that is there a list of viewers? I don't think that there's a list of viewers.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, talk amongst yourselves for a moment because I gotta figure this out. Man, I was so prepared today too.
You were. We were early.
We were doing so well. Everybody was on time. Everything was good.
I didn't prep. I should have watched the last scene too. Wasn't there another scene? There's been a couple scenes that have come out from Batman v Superman that were like deleted scenes, or else I'm just like flashing back to this morning.
Just the one, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that everybody that was in the chat is also. Oh no, we've also got Jason Samuel. Unless is he? I don't remember if he's a supporter or not. Unless he's a secret one. Okay, I'm gonna draw a different number then.
Sorry.
Because I know that he is in the chat. Everybody who's watching live right now needs to sound off.
Put your names in the chat.
Yeah,
because if you're listening to the chat,
talk in the chat in order for me to know that you're.
If you're not a Thunderquack Patreon subscriber, because if you're a Thunderquack Patreon person, you're automatically in the draw, and then anybody that's listening to or watching the live stream is also in it. So put your name in the chat if you are not.
If you want to win.
If you want to win, and be guilted by us for not being a Patreon subscriber. No, it's good.
Okay, I'm gonna draw a new number. Give me 1 second here. And then I just need to adjust this.
We believe you, Mike. It's good. Magic is all there. Sorry, whoever was the winner the first time. You'll never know who you were.
You'll never know who you were. I'm the only one who will ever know.
We want to be fairsies. So.
Yeah. And the winner is Philip Fulton. So Philip Fulton, you are the winner. You get a copy of the Batman v Superman soundtrack on iTunes and a $25 Amazon gift card. I'm gonna have to figure out a way for us to do this drawing in the future, but it's okay. We'll figure it out. But it worked. It's fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine here now. Congratulations.
How are you?
Yeah.
Philip. Yay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it. So thank you guys for listening, watching. I guess there's also video if you want video. But, of course, people will also be listening because this will be the first Thunderquack Patreon Roundtable that is available as an MP3. So thank you to our supporters. As always, we could not do this without you guys. You definitely make it easier on our wallets to produce podcasts, and we thank you for that. We thank you for all your support. If you want to support us, you can head to patreon.com/thunderquack and pitch in. Everybody at the $1 level gets access to our Facebook group, our Patreon exclusive Facebook group. $5 level gets you an MP3 of the Roundtable. Exclusively, and $10 gets you access to the exclusive Thunderquack podcast, which will be coming. So it'll be $10 supporters will get it sometime, I think, like the second week of April, but $20 supporters will get it sometime in the first week of April. So. Yeah, we're just working out. I'm just scheduling with my co-hosts on that for this our first episode, but that's coming up. And of course, you can check out all of our podcasts by heading to thunderquack.com. You can check out Amanda is on Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, and Tim is on Star Wars: The Saga Continues, and I am also on Quiver the Green Arrow podcast, but I'm also on let's see, the Rebels podcast as well, and the Pullbox podcast, and technically the 8 Bits of Destiny podcast, which only has backlogged episodes because we're not recording new ones right now, because we're figuring out what to do with that. And I'm supposed to be doing a podcast called Irregularly Scheduled, but the first episode has yet to come out. And it's kind of taking a back seat because now we're doing the Thunderquack podcast, but that's okay. I'll get to it eventually. Don't worry about it. But you can check out all of our awesome podcasts by going to thunderquack.com. And you can find links to their respective websites and iTunes links and all that sort of thing there. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you on the next roundtable.
Later.
Bye.